Hello, my friends, and welcome back to my little channel where I talk about awakening, the matrix, self-love, longing, the new earth. It's all about this new energy that's coming in and how we get out of the old, which I call the matrix. We can give it many other names, and I have used many other ones. Certainly, the veil, an illusion, um, a simulation, uh, virtual reality headset. There's a lot of words for it. A dream, maybe a nightmare for many. It's really all the same. It is living in the program that we're receiving in our mind or as our mind. It's the five sense mind, which is the matrix, which is a program, which is not really who we are. So if you would like to get out of the matrix, get out of the dream, right? If you want to get out of a dream, you have to wake up. It's obvious, right? If you think about a dream that you have at night, it's very hard for us to compare that to this life because it's the same way when you are asleep in your bed and you're having a dream. Very few people, unless you are able to do to be awake in your dream, then nobody thinks about that you're in the dream, right? It's like it's as real as it can be. A little more exciting sometimes than the life we have now. It seems like we can do more things. We can fly, right? We can create things out of thin air. But in this lifetime, we are all asleep in the dream and we're all dreaming it up together. So that's why it's not so easy to just, as you would say, snap out of it, just wake up from it, because it is a program and we are fully engaged in this program. So here we are talking about emotional intelligence, which I talked about, I think, yesterday. And I would claim that if you're not emotionally intelligent, it's because you have not entered into your felt sense experience, which is not what's going on in here. I'm not saying it's not connected, but there is a way we need to move out of this thing here between our ears and start entering into our direct experience so we can start sensing into, I would say, a whole different world, a whole new frequency, a whole new energy and experience, and that you cannot experience up here. It's simply impossible. This is a program. This is the dream. Okay. And if we always just go there for our answers and our information, we're missing a huge piece of what's going on. The same when you start going in here, there's a lot more going on. But for most people, if we just stay here without going in here, it's very hard to snap out of it unless we have some kind of a divine intervention where things just open up for us. I had one of those many years ago when I still lived in Denmark, where in a meditation, heaven opened up in a way I can't even describe, and it stayed with me for several months. Unbelievable experience, of course, but it didn't keep me out of this forever. And there was a lot of work I needed to do, and there still is. It's an ongoing expansion, I would call it. From my point of view, you might be light years ahead of me, and you can come up with a very different experience. But I always share from my own experience because that's all I have access to as a reality, not as a concept. So let's go back to the emotional intelligence. If we're living in here, we will react emotionally to everything that we are experiencing. And I have often talked about that it's our emotional attachments to the matrix that keep us stuck in there. So I guess I want to emphasize on that a little today. If we're only living in here and we have no access to our felt sense direct experience, which is also, of course, connected to our heart. And in my experience, the heart is the portal to open up to the field, the presence, which is everywhere, the divine. I experience it here as a oneness with all of it. But if I'm only up here, I have no access to that. So that's why if we are only in our mind, then we may have a high IQ, very possible. But people with very high IQs can have a challenge to connect with their emotions, their emotional intelligence. So there is a way where, of course, eventually we don't want to cut one off from the other, but since we are so cut off from our heart, our body, our felt sense, our divine expression, it's probably a good idea just to at least give it a little vacation and start spending time to become conscious and present with your emotions and learn what it is that you feel and experience inside of you as it relates to the world, which is everything. This is how you know if you are able to be present with your experience, pure, pure and separate from the outer world, separate from the world that triggers emotions in us that we have not yet been able to integrate and be present with. So if something triggers you out there, like we talked about yesterday, there is like a mingling of our emotion and our emotional attachment to it and an identification with it and a resistance to it, an opinion about it, an attachment to it. There's this thing happening, and then there's something arising in us, as we can call it I don't want to say this as a blank statement, but possibly an emotional immaturity that only knows how to react to what's happening on the outside. It's almost like they're one. And you might experience that, maybe not in everything, but there might be things that really trigger you still, that when something arises here, immediately and simultaneously, there's something arising inside that identifies with it or fights it or blames it or whatever it is. You can see it's intermingled. It becomes this one thing, and we are not emotionally mature because we are we are identified with this outer thing. So in order to become more emotionally mature, we need to learn how to separate ourselves from the outer trigger. That's the first step. You take a deep breath. When you feel that you're fighting, first you need to become aware that you're even doing this. And then when that happens, you take a breath and it's like, okay, let me take a breath and just pause here and notice what's going on, right? So you already create a little difference. a little space. And then you'll notice that there's this thing, this trigger, a person, a situation, whatever it is. And then you'll learn just to observe it and allow it and let it be. You practice to not go back in. It's hard in the beginning, isn't it? We all know that because we're so used to having it all glued together as one. So we need that gap. We need to take a pause and take a gap. And then we can become intelligent with our own experience. That's where I see emotional intelligence happening, when we're able to really fully be present with our own experience as we untangle from the outer experience that triggered this inner experience. So now we can learn to be present with that. And the more we are able to be present with it without judging it, without blaming ourselves, without making ourselves wrong, without trying to get rid of it, without suppressing it, without putting it to the side, but really as a juicy dip into this with the intention to be present with it and feel into it like, what is this thing? What is this? Because we never really explore it. We just, it's like, whoop, here we go, right? And then, but when we separate it, we can just like, well, what is this? It's a feeling in here. It's a tension and heaviness and energy and explosive feeling. Something is going on in here. Now I want to know what it is instead of just giving my life to it. So that's how we become more emotionally mature and intelligent. And like I said the other day, this takes time, this takes practice. There's so many layers of this unconscious emotional attachment and reaction. It's like there's a lot of layers. So it's not just one time and it's done. I wish, I only wish, but it doesn't work that way. But as we become more emotionally mature and emotionally intelligent, then we can see this for what it is. And we don't need to, go in there and fight with it or get rid of it or whatever it is. We can stay present here and let this thing just do what it does. And when we don't feed it and engage with it, it starts dissolving because it needs us, our energy, to stay engaged and stay alive. Now, I have talked about this before because this is what we can call the matrix or an illusion. And an illusion is not real. The matrix is not real. It's a program that's running in our mind as a suggestion. I know this is hard to grasp. I had to really listen to a lot of Joe Goldsmith's talks many years ago for a long time. It's like it wouldn't land, right? Because it's like that makes no sense. That's not, I don't know what it means. So don't try and figure it out. If it's something you're curious about, start doing an inquiry about it to start becoming aware that, this is not real. It's a suggestion, hypnotic suggestion, as Joe Goldsmith would call it. And that has stayed with me for so many years, and it's been very helpful um, to recognize when these suggestions come in, whether they are just thoughts in here or whether these thoughts have manifested outside and are showing up in my life. And as I was learning that, I would just say, okay, this is just a suggestion. I do not need to agree with a suggestion, right? You would agree with that, right? You don't, if there's a suggestion you don't are not interested in, you don't have to agree with it. It's exactly the same here. For me, it's gotten a lot easier over time as I practice this. And that's why it's easier for me to just to keep my cool, keep my peace here and say, no, I'm not interested. Sorry. And then I can see if there's something that is arising that wants to engage. And then instead of going and engaging, I engage with this in my own presence. And that softens then. And then I can eventually drop back into the peace. So it's definitely a process, but emotional intelligence or emotional maturity, I don't know if it's the same. Right now, I'm going to make them the same just for now. And when we have that, that is how we can disengage from the matrix. We can slide out of it by owning our own experience. And this is where we start dissolving this whole inner structure that has run our lives. Emotional intelligence, my friends, it takes a lot of practice. And I don't know how people do it on their own. I certainly didn't. I didn't know how to. I was becoming a Hakomi therapist, which is all about the inner and becoming present with what's going on. So I was learning it in the 2 year training and in the supervision and in the private sessions with therapists where they were helping me. They were reflecting back to me what was going on in me so I could be present with it. And it reminds me of how I talked a lot about the mirror lately, right? I hadn't put those two together. Maybe I'll do a video on that. That actually, as a Hakomi therapist, we're all about reflecting back what the client is expressing but not conscious of. So that might be a whole different video. So, but just letting you know that that is something that you can choose to work with, with a therapist. You can do it with me, or if you have somebody else who's able to really help reflect your experience back to you so you can be present with it in a whole new way. Most people have no clue how to do that. I've seen it over and over. Even people who may have done a lot of deep inner work, a lot of spiritual work. But when it comes to moving into our felt sense experience, it's almost like many people, they draw a blank. And so it's really a practice. It's something we need to learn, that emotional intelligence and learning to listen to our intuition and to the cues in the body and the expression from the soul and the longing. There's so much going on here besides what this one thinks it knows and wants us to believe. So I want to invite you, if this resonates, and if you really would like to become more emotionally intelligent, and I'm not saying you're not because I don't know you. So this is just putting out for those who go like, yeah, I need to learn that. So then set up a self-discovery session with me and let's figure it out, Let me help you and support you in learning how to be present with yourself, with your felt sense experience, and then be able to grow in your presence, in your beingness, without being caught in the matrix anymore. And then you can join all of us who are on this path into a whole new, we can call it the new paradigm or the new earth, where we are leaving the matrix frequency behind and we're beginning to embody a whole new frequency. And there's many people who do this. And if you're not connected with that, you're very much invited to join in that. All right, friends, that was it for today. And I will maybe see you again tomorrow. Have a blessed day.